Hello, welcome to our fourth session on document reference. As a candidate or proposed profile for AU Core Release 3, this is, as I said, it's the fourth session. We've had three thus far. Pretty much we've worked through a a scope of what the profile would focus on. And we've looked at must support elements, etc., in the previous two sessions. And all of that's being documented in the wiki page, the top wiki page that I've got down the bottom there, the document reference info sessions. There's a separate vendor support page as well if you're a vendor or got an implementation of some sort, very interested, or you're planning to implement document reference. We're really interested in what your requirements are, what you've implemented, what you intend to implement. And again, that's just giving us a bit of an insight into what data elements of the document reference resource we that you intend or have implemented, and also looking at some of the coding, which is very relevant to today's sessions, which codes you support, and also what reference types you use for things like author, etc. Um, so what other profiles that you will be, or resource types that you reference in your reference elements. Information sessions are an informal conversation. We're not making any decisions. It is just to help me compile a proposal to go to the working group meeting. And we have, as I've indicated here, we've got a proposal that went to yesterday's AU Core Working Group meeting, and I'll give you an update for that, but then there will be another portion of this that will be proposed for the next working group meeting in 2 weeks' time. Just to get started, if we can join a Minty just to see if we've got similar people that have attended these information sessions. So if you can go to menti.com or use this QR code 888-58509, and I'll skip to the next page and I'll make sure that QR code remains on the screen. So, um, so I'm expecting that we'll have a few regulars looking at the attendance list, but if it's your first time for joining an AU Core Info session, it would be great to see um, that we continue to have new people attend. So that's great. And as a result, if you've got any questions, because we are, as I said, this is the fourth session, so there's been a lot of context that we've provided in the past. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to stop us and bring us back. But I will give you an overview of what has been discussed so far in a moment. So we've just got a couple more that have joined. Waiting for a response on that. So I might wait for one more, perhaps. That seems to have joined, although that someone new has attended. Okay, great, got one. There we go. So the next one, does your system implement document reference resource type? Yes, we do now, or not yet, but we do intend to. And there is the opt-out option over on the right for those that are here as just interested parties or not. Guess standards development is probably the more likely classification for those that are not implementers here. Okay, so we've got four that have implemented, a couple that intend to implement, so that's excellent. There might be one more perhaps that I'll wait for. Seeing I got 15 on the last one. Okay, maybe I won't. All right, let's get on with it. Okay, so today's agenda, as I said, we have previously talked about scope, we've talked about must support elements. We probably didn't talk about must support obligations, but we certainly jumped into that yesterday when we went to the working group meeting. So that won't be on the agenda. We're going to talk about value set bindings and search parameters, but I'm thinking we might get, I'm hopeful, the easy one out of the way first, and hence do search parameters first, and then we'll come back to value sets. So what's our scope and usage for the document reference profile? So document reference is used for indexing and storing and discovering and accessing clinical documents. And so what we're looking to do with this profile is provide a minimum set of expectations for that. To I've got here formatted digital health documents. So they're not just clinical documents. Um, they are any kind of healthcare document, but it is intended to be for a individual's, well, for a subject of care within, and of course, all of our profiles within a core are within the Australian context. So we're not looking at every kind of document. We're not looking at templates. We're not talking about correspondence between clinicians that isn't related to a patient. We are talking about documents that are related to a patient with the purpose of them to be exchanged with effectively related to patient records. There is a little bit of additional context provided in that second dot point, but I won't go into that today. Um, So this was presented yesterday at the and was passed. So not necessarily the words as on the screen, but in principle, this is the scope of our profile. Furthermore, what we went through was the must support elements, and we also looked at the mandatory elements. And when we went through this list, we were basically put together this as a single vote and as a motion. You can see here we've got the elements that are all must support, but there's three of those that are mandatory: type, category, type, subject, and content attachment content type. I did accept a friendly amendment on reducing the content type back to 0 to 1. But what I had noticed was when reviewing the base um, resource type is that there is actually a conformance or a conditional statement in here, an invariant that actually says that if the attachment has data, it shall have content type. So you don't need to um, have a content type when there's URL when we're referencing external to the resource, but if you're storing it with as data as binary 64 within this resource, then you shall provide a content type. And that is probably why I was quite happy to accept this motion, because I knew that in the background. And what I heard from Marika, and I think I saw Marika pop in, was that her issue that she raised about this particular element was in the context of referencing the document externally. So, um, you know, I did know this was here, but I did want to bring it up today just so that everyone was clear that there is this invariant, which I think makes sense. And I see a thumbs up from Marika, so that's great. So what was agreed? We, as I said, mandatory must support we also looked at the reference types. So for subject, we're going to reference an AU core patient. For author, we're going to reference all of these AU core profiles, depending on the kind of author, except for device, because we don't have a profile. So again, what was on the right, we pretty much we did talk about the must support obligations effectively as our standard or default set of obligations to apply to all of these must support elements as an AU core responder or AU core requester, being populate if known and no error. And as a single vote, that was passed. Any comments at this point? So great. Um, yeah. Okay, so as I said, I'll do search parameters first, and I'm going to just basically put out there a minimum set of search parameters I think that was worthwhile. And I think when we were talking about composition yesterday in the working group meeting, I had a very similar set of search parameters, but the there was a suggestion of including a date, and I suspect that we probably want to talk about the idea of supporting a date here as well. So basically, what we've got is a recommendation, a shall for patient only search criteria, a shall with patient plus type, so that we know what kind of documents. So you could restrict it down to patient summaries, for example. And then there's a should for patient and author. So what other patient search parameters do we think we want to consider as our minimum set for AU core? Seeing that no one wants to speak up, why don't we do this as part of a Minty? So seeing the ones that have been suggested so far with patient, patient plus type as shall, and a patient plus author as should.
Heath, just confirming for the type, for the value set that's bound, we're using the quite extensive value set that is all LONC codes, quite a lot of different variety here.
Yes,
Yep, perfect.
we will get to that next, but yeah. I
No,
mean, in the
that has
context of,
yeah. Sorry, you go.
I said in the context of search parameters, if you use one of those, any of those in that large set, um, and your system doesn't support that particular code, you would just respond with basically an empty result. That's kind of what you would do with those sorts of things. And even if it was a code that wasn't in that set, you would respond. Like if it's an invalid code, for example, effectively you're responding in the same way. You wouldn't be erroring. You would just say, I don't know what that code is. No, got nothing. Philip?
Hey Heath, two things. One, I was thinking about there might be a need to search with an encounter filter, and I don't know if that needs to be at this point or not, but show me a discharge summary for this encounter for this patient, as opposed to show me all the discharges and all the discharge summaries for this patient since the dawn of time, is kind of where my head goes on that. And then the second point is you said you were going back to Minty. And at least from my mentee, it says back to slides, although I'm seeing a few people respond. So that may just be my mentee version. That's problematic, but I don't know. Others may be limited on their ability to vote also.
Oh, that happens to me as well. If you hit refresh, that works.
So I need to press refresh or you have
No,
to?
no, it's still.
No, I just figured out I'm tethered to my phone and my phone has disconnected from my laptop. So it's a user error on my side. Sorry about that.
No worries. Um, so while that Minty's going, I'll just go back to my slides. So your first point, Philip, was talking about a particular encounter, right? So you're suggesting that maybe this encounter search parameter?
That's what I was wondering.
Hmm.
I don't think you could search. Well, I mean, unless we were going to talk book fire, I don't think you should search encounter on its own. But I'm wondering if it's a parameter that would be a potentially good search combination so that you could get down to um, not only just the patient and the type, but a particular visit or the most recent or some concept like that. That's where my head
Yeah.
was going.
And I mean, I can see someone has suggested period, and I'm assuming the MS there is actually suggesting that we should actually make period must support. Um, so I'll sort of address both of those. We have n not included encounter as part of the context as a must support element at the moment. So given it's not must support, we wouldn't be providing a search parameter. Um, in AU core against that parameter, against that element. And similarly, okay, sorry, I stand corrected. We already have period as must support. So, um, I think, we could definitely entertain the idea of a period. And I think personally, I think that's more useful than date.
Do you have a comparison table for the search parameters across like IPA and US core and stuff?
No, I don't. Not on search parameters.
Okay. I'm just having a look now at IPA, which does have so it's got both a should patient type date and a should patient type period. So it does have both of those. I'll just have a look at US core.
So what I do know is that the dollar summary operation has a date parameter which actually works against the period and not against the date. As I said, like if we look at the definitions here of period, it's the time of service that is being documented. So from a clinical perspective, it is a more useful, um, it's a more useful element. Now, I'm just wondering whether my screenshot was actually incorrect. So I'm just going to go back again. Yes, we did seem to have included period as must support in yesterday's proposal.
Okay, so US core has patient type period as should. It doesn't have patient type date.
Mm. What do people feel? Philip in particular, I think you would probably have some good implementations, especially around US core and etc. And IPA perhaps. Should we have both plus date and plus period as shoulds?
I'm trying to go look at our documentation. It's taking me a bit. I mean, it seems reasonable. Whether I have that in existence today or not, I can't answer you yet right now. But it seems reasonable to me at least.
So I'm seeing period um, in big bold. Is that a standalone, or are we talking about in combination with patient? So whoever just entered in period, would you like to comment on that? So we've already got author as a should. We don't have facility. because we don't have a facility type, assuming we're talking about facility type. So facility type is not a must support. And I'm just trying to go back to what we had as must support. I don't think we've got custodian either, which would be if with the actual organization, if that's what we meant by facility rather than facility type. Maybe the person that talked about facility type might want to talk about that one.
If we had encounter, that would give you facility via location, wouldn't it?
Not necessarily, because may not be populated in the encounter. Danielle?
My thoughts on patient and facility are it sounds like a really interesting thing for for like a HIE or a nationwide kind of record locator service. Because what that'll do is say, for this patient, give me every hospital record you have. No matter what hospital or anything like that, potentially. So that's what that does. It doesn't seem to me to be AU core. I do think it has utility, but yeah, I couldn't see it in forming like minimum search support criteria for AU core.
Okay.
It looks like from my side, I mean, of course, you can look at it by a specific document and those kinds of things. It looks like we support authorization types of provider, patient, system. I don't think that's really, it looks like it's more the query parameters, and we would do category, date, encounter, patient, period, and type.
Can you just repeat those? So type, category, patient.
Yeah, type, category, date, encounter, patient, and period.
Yeah. So you got the two dates, date and period, and the extra one as you indicated, encounter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which as I said, at the moment we don't have as a must support element.
Yep. And I don't know that it necessarily has to be must support for every single vendor. Hospitals live and die by the encounters, but that's not the case everywhere in healthcare, right?
Yeah. I think I might skip this question. Other than the fact that basically what we're doing is, and as we did yesterday in the working group meeting, we just basically asked the working group whether they were happy with accepting the default set of interactions that AE Core does for the composition. So the intent would be that we would support read and search for document reference as we did for composition yesterday. Is there any concerns about that approach? Okay, so what I am hearing is that we should include in the proposal to include both date and period as shoulds into the set of search parameters as combined with patient.
I think one of it was patient type. So I think it was a combo, it was a three combo, like patient type period. Like give me all discharge records in this period, not just a give me every record in this period. That's what I thought it was. I don't know, I guess yeah, question then, what's more useful to people? Doing a doing just like give me every record in this particular period, or give me all the insert thing here, like specialist letters, discharge summaries in this particular period.
There's a note from Paul in the chat saying that he mentioned it more as a validation for search rather than a standalone. So as a qualifier, I guess.
So what I'm hearing is rather than the period, sorry, that's not working very well. Let me go back and forth. That's not working very well either. Just go out of. Okay. Is that what we're talking about? So patient plus date as a should, and patient plus type plus period should.
Personally, I would like to put type on the patient plus date as well. But I don't know. That might not have been what everybody else was thinking.
Can you wildcard type?
Uh, sort of. If we do it right, no.
You can do ors.
Yeah, you can do a bunch of multiple or multiple and kind of stuff.
Could we see both then? Maybe patient plus period and then patient plus type plus period. That wouldn't add too much extra.
Sure. I mean, I guess we're all thinking this is like max should, right? These are not shells.
How's your big EMR going to go with patient only? That's a lot of documents.
Paging.
I'd be more worried about a HIE or like the My Health Record. That'd be a
Oh,
nightmare
yeah.
for the My Health
All
Record.
the documents exist. Yeah. Mm, sure.
Are you suggesting we should downgrade that to a should?
No, I don't think so. Let's wait for voting.
All right.
Cool.
Findings. Um, so document reference type. As a document type value set, as it's that we inherit from FHIR as a preferred binding. It includes 6,401 concepts. So basically a whole stack of allowing codes that come under the doc scale. And you can see a few of those that are in this list. I'm picking out patient summary as one that we've used in the past. There's probably one in here. No, there's nothing that's, I was thinking otherwise. I mean, there's things like consult notes, patient consent, outpatient notes, and then we get into specific things like cardiology, outpatient notes. So hence you can see why these pre-coordinated terms can blow out quite considerably to 6,500. In Australia, as we did for composition, we have one that we have as part of a fire IG, and we already have that in a proposed AU5 document type code value set. So what others might we want to include in this set? Having some conversation this morning, there was a few that got proposed that we might want to consider. And if we just sort of think about in general what they might be, things like referrals and hospital discharges, some specialist letters, notes that are taken within a visit, an actual visit summary, which is what we're working on in May around encounter summaries. A note of any kind. We've actually got a clinical note that we've used in e-requesting, that we've got a new low code that has been assigned for that particular purpose. And then we've got, but I almost question whether that is an actual document or whether it's part of a document. So that would be, I'd be interested in the e-requesting people around those. We've got some surgical reports and questionnaires and care plans and the like. So, and things like nursing handover notes. All sorts of good candidates. But really, how are we going to manage this? I guess is the bigger question. So within the Australian context. Again, what I might do is just to run through a bit of a Menti, but if you've got any thoughts, please put your hand up and speak whilst we're doing the Menti, but even before we kick it off. Firstly, I just want to know if you're even implementing the document reference type, whether you intend to, or just the get out of just respond, but not
It's a
applicable
bit
to you.
it's a bit chicken and egg, I reckon, because if we had some codes people could refer to, they might apply them. But I think I haven't seen a lot of stuff implemented.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, you and I have had some significant discussion around this, and it's for me, it's like, do we just want a placeholder so that as we start to have people say, it would be really good to standardize on this, can we get agreement that this kind of document, and that's why that table I presented was kind of more of an abstract, you know, uh, logical representation of the kind of documents that we have, things like encounter summaries or visit consult notes, those sorts of things, specialist letters. Can we agree for that use case, this is the low-ink code, and then start to compile a good set, a value set that we use
I-
within Australia that we've agreed on?
Mhm.
So patient summary, I've already proposed that patient summary should be part of this value set. What other document types are important for your system if you've implemented it, intending to implement it? So Danielle, you don't see it would be any more difficult?
No, I think we've done trickier things in the past and still work on them. Like this is every terminology is special, but also not special.
Um, so I guess what I'm proposing, like I did with composition, is that we create a value set as a placeholder. We start with patient summary as the exemplar code, and then we add to it as we see fit. You're happy with that kind of approach when you
I
say you
am.
don't see it being any harder?
Well, I mean, in terms of what we were saying about how we manage it, we have a community means to put forward change requests to discuss whether or not they're appropriate and make decisions on them, and the ability to go publish changes on those decisions. So that's always, the backbone infrastructure. I guess the what you're posing now is what codes can we agree on?
Yeah.
One is patient summary clearly. There's a suggestion there for clinical note for EREC. I'm definitely with the people who've proposed the discharge summary code. That's used everywhere. And I think there's at least a few that we can start out with.
Yeah,
Um,
I think
and
referral note's a big one.
yeah.
I know because in the GP space, I had heaps of projects that wanted to get a list of referrals from which are letters basically in the GP system, and they couldn't do it. there was no easy way to do it.
So, Brett, I know you've provided a long list. Do you want to put
Yeah,
maybe
for
a
sure.
top three into this Menti?
Sure.
So you kind of talked about referral. Now, while we're doing this, I would like to the person that mentioned clinical note for ERAC. As I said before, I'm a little bit questioning whether that is a standalone document. If I understand the purpose, it was for some of the contextual stuff, such as um, where we might be wanting to record the fact that someone is pregnant or whether they've got some medical devices, those sorts of things. Do we actually consider those things as standalone documents that can actually be exchanged with outside the context of it, the e-requesting request?
I put it there, and it's not a requirement, I guess, because we have our own document reference profile. However, if you wanted to inherit from AU Core, we would need it.
Okay, yeah, I didn't think about it in that context.
I'm going to mildly rebut there. I would hope that this starter set that we're doing is an additional binding like we did in composition. So I don't think you would need it in the AU Core document reference. And even if we put it in, it would be probably preferred. I don't know that we could go to extensible, to be honest.
As an actual binding, they're actually suggesting that we would go beyond an additional binding.
I think we should just do an additional binding, but
Hmm.
if we weren't going to, I think it would be a hard sell to try to say that it should be extensible.
Yeah. The I don't know if I've got it here. Maybe I've got it elsewhere. Oh, yes, I do. So we've got the note of any kind, and we've got the pertinent note in a clinical context. I struggle with the difference between these two. Um, and I know that, there was a lot of debate in e-requesting, and, the fact that you went and got your own code was to probably in response to overloading it with some of the existing use of the existing
Hmm.
codes.
So a note of any kind is more general than the clinical note one there, because clinical context is very specific. It's the context around that clinical consultation or episode or whatever.
Mm,
Whereas note of any kind is anything.
yeah.
It's unspecified.
So I'm thinking as a candidate set of standalone documents may not include clinical note, whilst it's not disallowed in the context of e-requesting to use that code. But I wouldn't be including it in the
So,
candidate set so that it is
so are we
clear.
just going to are we just going to do a document type value set, as opposed to, I mean, they are referenced. So you kind of have a distinction between standalone documents and other kinds of notes. Because I can think of things like progress note, which is not a standalone note, but they're kind of similar. They exist in the context of a visit or something like that. And I don't know why we need to separate them.
So you would be comfortable with having a candidate value additional binding that includes clinical note and progress note and patient note and consult note and referral
Yeah.
note. Okay.
Yeah. I think though we should, like, dropped it in the chat as well. Like I think it would be good to put some more descriptive stuff around these terms as to, because I mean, it's sparse. The meaning is not clear. So like, when it'd be nice if you say, when we use them in Australia, this is what we think they are. Um,
Mm.
just to clear that up.
We have to be really careful and cool. We can't dictate other people's use case.
Well, terminology work group.
Neither could the terminology work group dictate, or should they downstream use cases. We can reflect.
That's meaning. Unless if you don't know what the concept means. I'm not saying, I mean, you need to explain what that concept means. Yeah.
Um, so we rewrite the definition for low ink.
Well, there's no definitions of the like that are particularly useful.
No, but that's not our job to do that. And I think that's certainly from my perspective, we don't want to redefine low ink, but we might want to say, and I think this is what Danielle's objecting to, what's the use case of a document use case, such as patient summary? This is the code you should use. For a referral, this is the
Yeah.
code you should
I think
use.
it's
Yeah, that's
okay
fine.
to re
Do it the other way.
hang on. I think I think it's okay to reflect a couple of examples that already exist. So e-requesting's already made a choice. That's not AU core dictating it. It's just going, e.g., this is how it's been used in e-rec. But core cannot and shouldn't dictate downstream use case choices. So in such a fashion. And it's not core's job to, yeah, to do all of that. So I think that's crossing the boundary.
Just before I cross to you, Michael, I've got the next question on the Minty. If you basically were, what I'd like to get an indication of whether we should provide an AU document type value set as an additional binding in release 3 of AU core. Michael.
That ties in nicely to my question. In US core on document reference, that the primary binding is a US core document reference type, and then they've got an additional binding, which is a min binding of the US core clinical note type. Do you understand what the intent of that and how
Are you talking
that's
about
intended to work?
category? You're not mixing it up with category?
No, I'm looking at type.
Oh, okay. I'm going to talk about category in a moment, but basically they've got a predetermined set of notes that they support in US core. So the kind of clinical notes. And so correct me if I'm wrong, Danielle, but the idea of a minimum is that they, it's the minimum set that they shall implement. So they have to support those codes to be
Yeah.
US core.
Yes, that's true. Rather than the pathway that we're taking, which is a bit more abstract, they did I guess, a clinical notes piece. So if we wanted to address something like clinical notes, we would likely also be addressing that, in which we would have some use case definitions then. But yes, that's what minimum means, that in order to be conformant, you shall support all the codes in the minimum value set.
Are those codes then also in the base binding,
Uh,
or is it an additional?
No, they're actual US core things.
No, they're
Hmm.
lowing. I mean, they're
Are
just
they?
it's like it's path
Oh,
report, it's discharge summary. Like they're just their minimum set of things for clinical notes is like 4 or 5 low ink codes. They're just low ink, so they are in the base binding. They've plucked out some and said, but you must support at least these to be like a US core clinical notes support, and therefore put them in an additional binding with purpose of minimum.
but the base binding on that is a US core document reference type, and then they've got an additional binding of US core clinical note type. See the
Yeah.
two bindings there?
Yep.
But, yeah,
So
they're just
that's the
low ink.
minimum set to the allowing codes. So they are part of the base binding. But basically as an additional binding, they're basically saying you shall implement these 10, 6, 8, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 codes.
To a degree, it's the idea around what was happening in e-requesting with this idea that of like let's agree on like the minimum 50 most common tests. So I think that's kind of the approach that they took with clinical notes and that binding.
We've got a number of people on the call, probably more than 20. I'd love to get a bit more feedback than the 6 that have responded so far are on this question, because this is pretty much the crux of today's session. And so we really only have 2 votes to get any kind of decision made. And I mean, maybe they're sending a message, but I don't think we have really a quorum.
And Brett's hand has been up for a bit.
Oh, sorry, Brett, I'm off the wrong screen. Sorry, I didn't see that.
That's right.
Brett, go ahead,
Yeah,
Brett.
like all that US core stuff. I mean, I think we should be aiming for that. To have a set that people can say, yeah, these are good ones to use, and then people can assess. I think we'll go through a cycle, right? People can assess how they're going to use them, and I expect then people will say, I've got a document type that's not here. I've got a nuance that's making it hard for me to pick codes. But I think it gives you a nice platform at least to move forward. And some of those things like discharge summary and maybe like referral note are like high value classifications. Um, I expect down the track people will say this is not specific enough.
Yeah, I think
But it gives them at least something to work with because I don't want to look at 16,000 codes.
I agree, but I don't
Yeah.
think Minna's taking it too far. As I said, every
Yeah.
system in the
I
US is
find
being
that's
asked to implement those 10 codes.
yeah. I agree. That's like I'm more that if you're going to pick a code, these are here's a set that are good.
I think those 10
You
codes
should
are
start
actually
there.
good codes,
Yeah,
but as a
yeah,
candidate set,
yeah, yeah. Exactly. The shells are pretty hard. Like I think that's
I'll see if I can
I,
get
yeah.
another.
I think
I think
on the
you'll muddy
consumer
the
side,
water
yeah,
because you've
yeah,
got laboratory and pathology there, and those are two very different things in the US. Whereas in Australia, we just talk about pathology as being both. So, I mean, if we're going to take that set, we're taking their model of meaning as well.
No, I don't think we would automatically take their set. I think some of the
yeah.
codes translate really well into our environment. Um, but yeah, I also don't
Yeah,
think
that's
we're in a position to call anything a minimum set at all. That there would need to be a quite a significant piece of work around clinical notes and record locator kind of stuff in Australia for us to be confident enough to put that kind of thing in our UCore. Because that is
yeah.
very,
That,
very restrictive.
but I think that's where I kind of want those Weasley guidance words to go. Oh, for this term, you would use it here and you'd use it there. But there's not saying that's the only place that you can use them. But it would be typical to use them in these ways to link it to. Because otherwise, people like I think it's okay when these things are named in a way that means something to somebody, but I think that's a bit of an ask sometimes. So having some words to say, oh, in a GP system, if you were sending out a referral letter, you'd use that code. If you were receiving a specialist letter, you'd use this code. In a hospital, if I was doing this, this would happen, right? And so, like, it's more just having examples of where it would apply, and then people will find a way. Yeah.
Example is okay, but we're like, didn't e-requesting say they're going to do a referral spec? Surely they should get to pick their code. Like, this is my concern about like defining this stuff
But it's
in.
broader than that. E-requesting is not, doesn't, I mean, referrals are part of many use cases.
Yeah, and there's a lot of paper
Yeah.
referrals.
Yeah.
And I mean, I go the same with, I'd be interested to have this conversation with you another time, Michael Osborne, about the lab, your comment about lab and pathology and diagnostic imaging. I think this is actually a really good set um, in the context of the kind of documents that are getting attached to patient records in legacy systems. Um, and I think it would be great to have these exposed through FHIR APIs. Okay, I think I've got enough of a quorum response there to move forward. So I know we've got 10 minutes and I'm about to open up the Pandora's box.
That wasn't it. There's
No,
more.
there's more. Category. So category is a set of 45 concepts in a document class value set, only as an example. Now we've made it optional, must support category element, and you can see some of the codes in here, and probably very similar codes to what you've seen previously, and certainly some of the codes, and this is not the full 45, but kind of reflects some of the interesting ones from my perspective, like that procedure note there that was in the US core one. You got discharge summary there. We've got progress notes in here. We've got consult notes in here. And the referral note, this plan of care, etc. Not sure what I meant by that. No category binding a constraint. Okay, so this is my proposal that we don't have any specific value set constraint, because we don't have an AU base. So yeah, completely forget about that top call out. US core does have this one required category. And with a starter set, as they call it, with one value of clinical note. It is a custom code. It is not a low-end code, but it gives them an absolute definitive way of actually saying this is a clinical note document. And then that links back to that type value set that we were talking about in the past. Brett.
I like this example set. I'm just going, that's not it. Because there are things here that are too specific. And like, I, yeah, I really think we need to have a good think. Because see, if I'm looking, oh, so where'd you get letter from? Was that?
Sorry.
No, no, that's right. Because that's one I would consider. Because I think whilst I suggested letter in the type, I think letter is actually a very good category.
Yeah.
And so I think it's more that in some cases, like we are struggling because, like, I know there are more specific types of letter, but at the moment I don't have a set that I can apply to that.
Yeah. So
So
this
yeah,
is a set of categories from my work with Medi Records. They've got a number of categories of letters. They just all types of letters, but they all get categorized of category. But they also categorize referrals specially. Um, they also produce documents that are around their visit notes. They deal with consent specifically. They allow attachments of clinical images, and I heard Marika talk about clinical images the other week. They also have types of assessments. So just an assessment group. And then we get into the things like reports and results and surgical letters and care plans as special things. And they also have an admissions module where they want to differentiate between various progress notes from handover notes from different types of providers within them. So as a category, they wanted to know that it's a progress note, even though it might be a nursing one versus a consultant one or a handover note. And there's different types of handover notes as well. But it is in the context of a hospital because it's an admissions module. So these are some of the examples that I've got here. Brett.
like I look at this list and I go, except for the emissions bit, which I'm not
Mhm.
familiar with the case. Like I think these are really good. Like I think this, from what I've seen, I think it honestly gels up really well as a set of general classifications.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I'll make it for the record because it's in the chat. I I don't think we're ready at all to do category. Category's not been really widely well implemented in Australia, and I think one of my concerns is that what's been put forward is just one axis of categorization. You don't have to categorize based on trying to have macro abstract codes of the information you already have in document type. We can be categorizing on other things. So I think that's a really early conversation to just go straight to let's just do this.
Yeah, because there's content classifications, setting classifications, right? And all of these things. I think the content ones are actually the primary problem because settings can be obtained from other places. But it's a good point to consider.
So once again, just looking to see if your system implements this category element. If you're an implementer, if you're not an implementer, please still respond so that we can see how many have responded. We like to get to about 15, I think was the response I got last time.
I was going to ask everyone too, like, do people have, because these are obviously important on exchange boundaries. I think there's internal record keeping problems and then there's exchange problems. So I think if we can, like, if I said there's a GP, there's a specialist, there's a hospital, there's an allied health professional, and thought about the exchanges that happen typically, that would be super useful if I had a pattern of workflow to kind of apply it.
So similarly, what document category codes in the context of what Brett's just said? What are the higher level category of documents or class of documents that you're passing? And, the table that I presented as well sort of gives you some of the things that I've thought about in the past. They're not mine. They're actually, various categories that have been come up with that are being used in a particular system. And some of them are in different modules. Some of them are actually just in a generic module, which, correspondence is an example, and they have different types of or categories of documents that they want to classify their correspondence in and correspondence out. And then things like attachments. And again, they want to classify their attachments. So no one's willing to put anything out there or still trying to get there? Because we are at time and I want to get to the next question. All right, excellent. Got one response. All right, I might move on. So if so should we provide a starter set, a candidate set of categories? So yes, a placeholder. No, not in R3. No, it's just all too hard. Let's not even try and have this conversation again. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Not quite beer o'clock yet on a Friday afternoon, but I won't keep you any longer. So thank you very much for this session. This concludes our information sessions. I've got enough information that I will now be able to hand over to Michael Wilson to present this at the next working group meeting.
Hospital pass. Thanks, Heath.
Thanks, Heath. That was awesome. I think it was
Thanks,
Thank
Heath.
you.
really good.
Thanks, Heath. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.